Yeah, dude, can we be betting on that stuff, man? Get it going? Yeah, dude.
I'm pumped.
If I win, I get to pee on Kostya's leg.
All right, this is Dojo Talks. We are talking Jesse today. Jesse recently won the U.S. Senior Open, qualified himself for the 2024 U.S. Senior Championship. It's very exciting. Actually, we're all super pumped about that. So today we're going to talk what Jesse needs to do to get ready for that tournament and maybe future U.S. Senior tournaments.
Yeah. So first, I want to say a couple things. Definitely a little lucky to have won it. I won it on tie break, so it wasn't like some clean thing. And now I'm currently at the Irwin Invitational, so this would have been my second chance to qualify. It's held the weekend right after. So it was not a convincing thing. I kind of want to it would be nice to have a convincing victory this weekend to, just, I don't feel like it was better karma about it. Now, one of the things I've been talking about for years is I've wanted to do this tournament because it really is like a cool event in St. Louis. I got to play the U.S. Championship a couple of times in St. Louis and then other U.S. Championships. It's just a cool event to look forward to, train for. And ever since I became a GM way back 2007, it's been hard to find a goal. And so having a goal that's tangible is really important. I think probably to have anybody. Kostya here, dude, this guy's got to get on it to get his GM title. He's been flouncing around.
Oh my God.
Wait,
let me just say, we're recording this from Michigan, just so everyone knows, from the U.S. Open.
That's right.
This is Jesse and I first time meeting since Dojo started. We played a couple of times, but we didn't talk too much.
Right.
Yeah, so this is cool. 5 minutes with Jesse. I have a training plan. I'm motivated too. This next year, I gotta work on my chest. I gotta get into shape. All kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So the idea of this talks is pretty simple. It's what does Jesse need to do to play well at the tournament next year? So I have roughly a year before it happens. What do I need to do? And my intention is to use the Dojo training program. And then it's kind of an interesting question, not just about me, but about the training program and to what extent it is sufficient for what I'm trying to do. And then if not, then do we need to rethink aspects of the training program? Yeah. So for example, we have a lot of feedback from the lower cohorts about people making progress, right? But so far, we just don't have that big of a pool of players, let's say 2,200 FIDE plus. So we don't have a lot of feedback of people making a lot of progress or anything, just because we don't have that many people yet. And that's one of the weak points of the dojo, right? And so me, Kostya, and David, and a couple other people are the guinea pigs for the program as we've got it set up for the higher levels. So that's something too, just something we can think about as we're thinking about me doing this training for the next year. I'll tell you what, I'll just say two quick things and then I'll hand it over to you guys. One of the things that's interesting about senior chess is it recognizes that people do get worse. And I feel 20 years ago, it was not understood that people are going to be getting worse. There's kind of a hopefulness, and maybe there's a little that people had back then, also maybe a little shame about talking about, I'm getting dumber or something like that, right? And so it's an interesting whole tournament. It's happened in the last, let's say, 10 years where senior chess has turned into a thing. And the fact that it's 50 plus is kind of interesting too, because you could say maybe 65 plus is where it should be. But really 50 plus is really where people start experiencing severe cognitive decline. And one of the things that I noticed last weekend playing the tournament is you saw a range of people, range of physical body shapes, and you saw some people with neurological twitches and stuff, people dealing with various conditions as we get older. And so it's kind of this tournament is who can stay fit in their mind the longest and persevere. And some people obviously age better than others. We can talk about Korchnoi. We can talk about Anand, right? There are people who have managed to keep their game up. It's very inspiring, but they're honestly a little bit the exception to the rule. And we all think that we can be Anand and Korchnoi, but most of us, in fact, are not going to be. Anyway, okay, I said only 2 things, I promise. Okay, so 2 things that I've noticed. When you're getting older, there's a variety of things that go into what I call chess IQ or chess intelligence. And 2 of them are memory and I would call your system 2 bucket. Okay, so memory is obvious. It's hard for people who are older to remember things. And not only let's say opening stuff, but let's say you learn a new concept or you learn a new endgame algorithm. I was just doing bishop and rook versus rook, and I went deep into that. Will I remember it, let's say in 4 years? Will the template that is imprinted on my mind, will that stick with me? Or because my memory is now weaker, will it just fade? So that's one thing that's definitely clear that people who are older are suffering from. And then also, the system 2 bucket is really interesting. So just to refresh, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, developed a bunch of psychological tests to see when people stop thinking on a level 2 scenario. Now, in chess, what that means is system 2 just means you're thinking deeply. When you stop thinking deeply in chess, you're just going to say, this looks right. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. We all do it. And what Kahneman showed experimentally is that everybody has a limit. Everybody reaches a point where they're just just going to toss out this random solution.
Looks good-itis.
Looks good-itis, yeah. But the thing is, so you can be aware of it, but it's not going to change the fact that you're still going to do it. Being aware helps because maybe you can take a moment and walk around the hall and then try to get a little bit of system 2 back, but it's ultimately not going to be overcome. And anyways, long story short, what I noticed in the senior events is that you get a lot of that where people just don't have enough gas left for that. And then they play quick moves and then boom, they're going to lose the game. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. A lot to discuss.
Yeah, that was a good point. I think the energy thing is a big deal, having a lot of energy for these tournaments, especially the long games. To me, it feels being in good physical shape is almost as important as being in good chess shape. I was just watching the U.S. Senior Championship recently in St. Louis, which was just totally dominated by Melik, GM Kachin, who just led the whole way through, just crushed it, beat everyone, leading by 2 points. And I thinking about his games. I didn't think he did anything super, super spectacular, but he definitely exploited other people's mistakes, their blunders. They would hang an exchange or something. He would just take it and then convert the game. And he didn't blunder too much. In terms of his openings, I didn't feel like he really showed anything super special. He was kind of playing his usual systems and just using his experience. Definitely felt like he was one of the players just kind of in the best shape, and it seemed like he had a ton of energy throughout the whole thing. So yeah, energy I feel like is super important, and that's just one aspect. So being in great shape.
Yeah. I think that's a very good way to sort of figure out what makes sense also is just look at the last couple of years and who won and what did they do, and can you figure out any patterns in who finished at the top and who finished at the bottom of the tournaments. And the energy one makes a lot of sense. So that sounds very reasonable. I think another factor there that we could bring up would be this post from Fishbein about how much the different players had played in tournaments other than the senior championship when they show up for the tournament. And you guys can also have your own thoughts about it or correct me if I'm getting it wrong. But I think one of the things he pointed out was that Melik had played by far the most OTB games of anybody in the past year, not necessarily with any particular success, but he just played a lot of games over the year, and then came into the tournament. And I think that Shabalov, who finished second, may have had the second most games played in the last year. And then there are some people who almost don't play. One tournament, 2 tournaments a year at this point.
And Shabalov won last year as well.
And Shabalov had won last year.
And the year before that, I think too. Yeah.
Maybe I know Kaidanov won at some point too. Last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
That Facebook post was really interesting. It seems like being good, playing shape, like playing a lot, definitely like matters. Like especially the months leading up to the event.
Mm-hmm.
But where were you going with that, David?
No, I just wanted to like bring it in as an idea, and it sounds like maybe I stated it correctly. So then the question would be, does that seem to us like a good idea for Jesse to try and play a bunch, or in general for anybody? Does that seem like a big component? Like with the energy, my first thought would be yes, but maybe careful about how much energy you expend in the last month before the tournament, in case you could show up to the tournament tired.
One funny thing about energy is like when I imagine, for example, playing the kinds of tournaments I would play in to get the GM norm where you'd play 9 rounds against tough opposition, that just makes me weak thinking. So much energy involved, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, especially you're so knocked out from that event that then when you have to return to your normal life too, you're just got nothing left. You need some time to recoup, and then, oh man, that's hard. That's the other hard thing about it, So it's interesting already, that for years I've known that about the energy level, and I've kind of picked tournaments that are, 5-6 rounds. It's better for me.
Right.
Yeah. Like when you see Kostya play 2 9-rounders back to back, right? Like he goes to Las Vegas, right? And he plays like the Invitational and then the National Open back to back. That's just, it seems brutal.
No, for me, I often need to like play myself into shape. So it's
right.
Like I'm not ready until the second tournament. Maybe you could find some tournaments that are 1 game a day. Because the US Senior is going to be like 1 round a day,
mm-hmm.
1 p.m. usually.
Honestly, I mean, I think the problem is, I'm sure many people listening to this podcast is like, if I took 2 weeks off, so I got kids and I had to negotiate with the ex and all this stuff, dude. So like, I had to negotiate for 2 weekends in a row. So when I get back, I have epic kid situation for the next 2 weeks when I get back. So like my life is toasted. So getting 2 weekends off, oh dude, I have to pay to pay big time for that time off, dude. That was not an easy negotiation. So yeah, just getting the time to play is going to be an interesting challenge. But I do want to say, recently I've been very good, and it's been very fun, honestly, rewarding. That every morning I've been getting up and I have been studying, and I think whatever we say today in terms of what I should do, that is the cornerstone in terms of a habit. Just getting up and doing work, and definitely I should play some tournaments. There's no doubt. I don't have any doubt. Finding those and which ones they should be, that's a whole interesting thing too. But even now, I have some games from last week to look at, and then I'll have some games from this one to study as well.
But what I was thinking is like, maybe you could still play these open events that are like 2 rounds a day on the weekend, but just play like the morning game. Just play like the morning game, just to have the fighting experience.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like there's nothing as good for your form as just like playing. Like you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to just like playing nonstop, but playing like 1 game a week or 2 games a week, I think, is a great way to just kind of keep yourself like in. Because there's just nothing quite like it. Like any kind of at-home studying or online playing. I mean, nothing is quite the same as just like having the clock. Your hand is like shaking. Like one move, could be your last. Like,
yeah.
Well, David, one thing is hilarious here is, so we're talking mostly about me today, but in terms of Kostya making GM, which is actually far more interesting.
Maybe
the dude is failing because he's not going over his games.
Okay, another episode, Jesse, and that we can save that for another episode.
Yeah.
Well, we can, but I just want to say it's interesting is that I think what's interesting about that, it's like, dude isn't following the program, and and I need to follow too. And
Right.
so it's kind of like we get this all the time in our Discord, people asking us, well, shouldn't I be doing X? And my answer is always, boss, just trust the program. And so that needs to be applied to myself, obviously, as well.
Sure.
And then there's interesting questions like, which part of the program should I be doing? And there's a lot of interesting stuff we'll probably get into that.
Yeah. Okay, so we can start off with two things that I think we all agree would be really good for Jesse's performance next year. One is for him to get in a good amount of practice, right? Like a high number of practice games, especially if possible, some 1 game a day kind of situations. And the second is to come with good energy, and so that may largely be on lifestyle and stuff like that, right? Just staying physically fit and healthy and all that, which Jesse's generally good at doing.
Gotta get ripped.
Although my experience with Jesse was mostly pre-kids, it's a lot easier to keep up a physical regimen without kids. I don't know, Jesse, how do you feel like you do now? Are you still in shape?
Yes, I feel pretty good. And one of the things that's interesting that shifted in my life, maybe this will be helpful to some people listening, is when you're training by yourself, whether it's chess or physical, this is very much the same. You have to decide what you're going to do. So, for example, before kids, I was doing my probably peak fitness was 2013, where I rode my bike for 10,000 miles. Dude. I was lean and mean. It was serious. But every day I had to decide what to do. And the 10,000 mile thing, which I set a goal for myself, was kind of like kept me on track to get that done. But basically, there wasn't like a regimen that I had to follow. And now, where I've been doing CrossFit, it's like I've exported that, handed that authority over to somebody else, and I just show up. Basically minimum 5 days a week, and it's pre-decided what I'm going to do with that, so I don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of ways in which I want the dojo to be like that for people as well. They just show up and do the recs, and boom. Do not use your energy thinking about what am I going to do? Like you're by yourself as a metaphor for the physical word. Be like, well, how long am I? Where am I going to ride my bike to? Am I going to do some push-ups at the end? Maybe yes, maybe no. And no, dog. It's got to be just written in stone. You just go do the work. You trust the program.
100%. Yeah, it's way easier and way effective.
Easier. Yeah, and that's what I want my training to be for U.S. Senior too. I don't want to think about it. We can think about it now. It's fun to talk about, but basically on a day-to-day level, I want it to be dialed in. I don't want it to be some question mark. Like, well, is Jesse going to do this or that? No, Jesse's got it all done. It's already set. Yeah. What dude is going to do?
I think it would make sense to kind of plan it out in phases. Like maybe for a couple months, you're like working on your calculation or working on your end games or working on your openings. And then you can think about like, I would do the openings closer to the tournament. I would do the calculation like earlier so it has more time to kind of sink in. And then, I don't know. I don't know if end games are like a huge concern, but end games are fun and useful. And definitely I feel like the end game sparring, like practicing all those end game positions. Mm-hmm. Imagine you could do 2 nights versus pawn just like on demand. And then like we release a YouTube video of you doing that, just like crushing.
Getting close. We're getting close. Me and David will work on that. And we were doing the bishop and rook versus rook. I'll say just a quick story about that that pertains. So at the last weekend, I witnessed a game that was, if it had gone a different way, I might not have won on tie breaks, where we had a GM versus an FM, and the GM had bishop and rook, FM had the rook, and the FM kind of knew what to do. You could tell he had some confidence, and he had 30-second increment. And I told myself the following. I said, dude is not going to be able to make it until getting to the lost position. And then I also said the GM isn't going to know how to finish it when he gets there. Both of those were true. And this game was lasting 5 hours. People are exhausted. And then dude lost on time on move 46. Not move 46. On the 46 of the 50 move rule. So he just had to make 4 more.
Yeah. And even, super jams will mess it up, like from both sides. Like from the defense and the winning sides. Yeah, really tough. A lot of these end games.
So a lot of that I want to dial in, and I really believe this part of the dojo training program at all the levels that doing those endgame algorithms isn't just for that magical moment when you have it, but there's beautiful patterns going on that talk about chess geometry.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus also not to something that we shouldn't understate is just the practice of working hard 30 seconds at a time. It's a very special and slightly weird thing, you know. When we started out doing the endgame sensei, you know, anytime my clock's under a minute, I was just freaked out, period, no matter what.
Right.
You know, and I just like I couldn't play against Kostya. My brain would just turn off, you know, the moment we started with 5 minutes plus 30 often, or 2 minutes plus 30, and when my clock would go under a minute, it's like I'm just done. Deer in headlights. But by dint of doing it week after week, at some point, I feel very comfortable in those 30 seconds. And obviously, you're not inventing some 10-move variation. You're not playing perfect chess, right? Like I haven't perfected my endgame at any point in any way, right? But I've honed a practical element of it, right? Where I can figure out what I can in 25 seconds and then just make my move. You know, and then do it again and do it again. And it might be just like a B-class move every single move, but I'm playing, you know, and it's just so much better than it was before. And I think that, you know, working on any random endgame algorithm, even if it's teaching you how the rook and bishop work together, you get some knight endgame, you'll still be glad that you put in all those reps playing, you know, 30 seconds per move, 30 seconds per move, zoned in against an opponent who's zoned in.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill I think that needs to get worked on. And a lot of people have improved in the last couple of years just from playing in all these tournaments. Now the 30-second increment is very, very common. And a lot of tournaments have switched to this like 90 plus 30 time control, which I think was, well, this last US Senior, actually, they used 2 time controls. There was extra time after move 40. But for many events, yeah, it's just 90 plus 30. Then you end up playing the end game out on the 30-second increment a lot of the time. And, yeah, it's very tough because sometimes you have just like, okay, playable endgame. You can just rely on intuition. Sometimes it's very sharp. You have to like calculate a lot or evaluate some king and pawn endgames, like 3 minutes on your clock. And then that's tough. that's not easy, but definitely worth practicing.
One thing before we leave this example, I just want to stress is, one of the problems about getting old is when I learn something like this bishop versus rook, and I really try to dial it in, if you learn something like that as a kid, like the stuff that I learned as a kid, oh man, I got that dialed in. I got that stuff dialed in, boss. I can do that, no problem. The stuff I'm learning now, to what extent do I really understand it, remember it like weeks after? Yeah. There was an interesting moment where I played in last week and an opening variation came up, and I had just studied it like a month before. I had mapped it all out. Dude, I couldn't remember. It was gone. Just, you know, like a wisp in the breeze, boss. It was totally gone. Yeah.
That may almost suggest that that the opening study is worth less, or even more generally, that any study that relies on memorizing something specific is not as useful as something that's just kind of skill building at this point.
Well, and one thing also that's really interesting about the last 4 tournaments, okay, so imagine I played 4 tournaments, is that despite having really studied openings, nothing at all, I won every single opening battle. Okay, so let me describe what I mean by winning the opening battle. It doesn't mean you won the game. It just means you come out of the opening and you knew maybe one move more. You understood it better. You come out ahead on the clock. You're better coming out of the opening. Those are all ways in which you won the opening battle. Yeah. And I really surprised myself to say like, oh, I won all those opening battles. So for example, even the one I just described where I didn't remember anything about what my line. I had an old line. I played that and I did great. Did great. It was fine. So it's this very funny thing where I've invested 0 time in my openings. On our dojo pie chart, it's like literally 1%. And the
Wow.
opening's probably maybe the strongest part. And I was just playing principled moves, boss. I wasn't, I was doing fine.
Jesse, is it easy for us to go check you out on the scoreboard and see your pie chart and see like which day you skip? Yeah.
Oh, I skip opening day.
Okay.
You have definitely the case over there, man. Yeah. And I've generally been trying to do a little bit of opening work like right before each tournament, kind of like cramming for a test, That way that would be more present in my life.
All right. So I see your thing. Wow, just nothing on openings. That's really shocking. And
it's funny too, because I get like a big feedback of the dojos that we don't do enough openings, and then like you get people complaining all the time about like files not being deep enough and stuff, and I'm just like, wow, who you're talking to here, man. Anyways, and I wasn't just playing seniors. It was only the last event I was playing seniors. Otherwise, I was playing kids and stuff.
Well, also your opening repertoire is very kind of system based. Like with white, you're playing the London often and like D4.
I played aggressive repertoire a couple times too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's new.
Up. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, I think playing some more combative openings for this next year could be very interesting for your chess, if I may. I feel like if you have any kind of like chess weaknesses, from what I've seen, and David maybe can disagree or not, I feel like a lot of times your focus is like on limiting the opponent's counterplay. Yeah. But then that causes you to miss like the most ambitious continuation, the most principled.
There might be something fair about that.
Like I remember, actually just recently when we were playing our endgame sensei, the rook endgame. Yeah. There were a couple of moments where like I felt like, okay, you had a sharp choice you could have played. Yeah. And you went like the safe option, and then I was very happy about that. I was like, trying to defend.
Yeah. So we need to talk. Oh, go ahead. We need to talk about that for sure, because that's like my number one thing for Jesse as far as his profile as well. But I have pulled up his pie chart here, just added into the screen share so we can see what he's been working on or not working on. So let's just talk about that for a second, and then we can take it down. So looking at Jesse's thing here, he's got 43% games in analysis. Okay, I can click on that to see if it's balanced between playing the games and annotating them. Yeah, nicely balanced. He does his postmortems, so that's looking pristine. And it's a pillar of our training program, so the fact that it's around 40% of his work seems good to me. Any thoughts, either of you, on whether 40% might be about right for this?
Also interesting, David, is if you could, right below it is the time spent, which I think is going to be even more spent on games.
Ooh, there it is.
We can do the time if you want.
Oh, it got to be less. Yeah.
So games analysis still really close to 40% on times and on points, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, looking at his time breakdown, it looks really good to me, Kostya, because I feel like the middle games and strategies and openings are a lot of that kind of stuff that he's likely to forget, and it won't help him that much. Whereas,
middle game strategy is also books that we've read,
I know, but then you forget what you read. So my point is, playing the games I think is really good, and I think keeping up a regimen of tactics is probably important. And if the end game has a considerable amount of end game sparring, I think these are really like the kinds of things that are going to be particularly useful for him at the senior. See if we can break down his end game. It's mostly Dvoretsky's end game manual and a bit of Van Perlo. So he could definitely use with some more sparring, although he didn't log the time he sparred with me, apparently.
No, because I didn't. Those weren't official. I didn't get the points, boss.
You didn't get the points, but this is your time breakdown. You can still update that you spent, 2 hours practicing an endgame that you never scored any points on.
Well, okay. Let me just say this actually goes to some practice about how do you log the points. But for what I've been doing is, I only log the points after I've
when you've completed the thing. Okay.
Yeah. It's just easier. So, for example, I'm working my way again through the best moves, some great calculation work. Mm-hmm. It's a book in the program, and I'm just going to put in all the hours when I'm done. So that'll be a bunch of hours.
Okay.
That's good.
Cool.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people, they like the incremental approach.
Right.
I definitely do.
For me, that's an easier way to track what I'm doing, but that's up to everybody, you know, how they can keep track of it. But
Also,
regardless,
I really want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, just sorry. Regardless, I mean, we could say like it looks like you've maybe spent a lot more time reading books than sparring positions. And like even if you're going through Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual or something like that, you know, like we have whatever 5 sparring positions for you, but I think, you know, spar to your heart's content. That's sort of like the minimum. I think compared to spending 100 hours reading a book, you should pull out some positions from the book and spar them if you can, you know.
Well, no, trust the program. We have all the algos. I got to do all those. We have the end game training positions. Got to do all those. So I think for sure with the sparring, and then if I'm going to do opening work, it should be, you know, sparring with you or some other people, just doing those opening positions. So,
I think opening sparring, would be super helpful.
I'm not distrusting the program in any way, Jesse. I'm just saying like there's some discussion or leeway about what's the best way to do the study from the books, right? Like there's different ways to do it, right? And when I was reading Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual, I did it with Alan Stein, and we would just like play out together tons of the positions from the book, you know? So we went through the book much slower in a sense, but that is a way of grappling with the material in the book, right? Is sort of like playing things out. And a lot of times at the final position of some variation, Dvoretsky says, and white's winning, and it's a draw. And more than half the time, I would say Alan and I, at least one of us did not know for sure that the position was a draw or a win at the end of his variation. And so we would play out the final position just to check, you know, and figure out, well, how does white win this position? And so forth. It's just a very active way of working with the book.
For sure. And let me say too that I think one of the biggest helps that I have is I have a pretty good relationship with the game's analysis, where, you know, I'm really spending 12 to 14 hours on one game and then doing the notes. You know, I stream putting in the notes, and then I have the lesson with KGB, and then I talk about, and then I, you know, come back to stream what he said. And that's been a really interesting process. It's also very rewarding, and that's fun, I guess you call it. Fun in a type 2 kind of way. Type 2 just being kind of hard and not immediately gratifying. But one thing that I think I've learned about it is KGB, if I was going to play that guy, it wouldn't be like I would lose every game. But that guy has got such a deep positional understanding that if I had to play him or somebody like him, there's a certain kind of game that I could win and a certain kind of game where I would have zero chance. That is, a lot of these old-time GMs can play certain kinds of positions, not all of them, but certain kinds of positions at a super GM level, where they know where the pieces belong. And that's not where I want to be. Maybe there's some positions I can do that too, but I don't want them to be able to play positions where they're comfortable. So I think when I think about how it would go down, how it would look for a really successful run, is to get in these games positions that are rich and tactical, that have a lot of surprises. There's no flow, move for move, and then also games that are really long and draining, because these people are not in shape. I can tell you that now, both in physically and like the post with Fishbein intimated, not in chess shape. A lot of them are just like doing this one tournament a year because they get to see their bros, you know, and a lot of them are taking draws with their bros, and it's not helping their tournament success, right? But it's also because they're exhausted and they're afraid of being exhausted, right? So if I can come in there and like play the long game, you know, boss, we're just going to sit here and we're going to play this out, you know?
Sure, Magnus style.
Then it's
Game 6 against Nepo, he's like, we're just going to play till midnight.
We're just going to go, boss. That's the kind of both attitude and thing I need to prepare myself, I think, the most. Also in this tournament, by the way, I know that There's a lot of old timers here like Fed and Sergey Kudrin. They do not have the desire anymore. They will make quick draws. And obviously you're not going to win the tournament like that, but somebody who wants to win the tournament, i.e. me, has to be prepared to be like, okay, boss, here we go. We're going to be here all night. And so this tournament is actually a great training tournament for me in that regard. There's going to be moments of hardship in this tournament. Like, so for example, I go to bed at 9 and this round tonight starts at 7. And usually I complain with these tournaments that they're, biased against the old people, but it was old people who organized this event. So I don't know what they're doing starting at 7. I know I'm not the only one to go to bed early as an older dude, So it's going to be, everybody's going to be pushed to exhaustion quickly. And then your sleep rhythm gets put off, whether you win or lose, right? Your sleep is just going to be totally wrecked. And then you're going to have to figure it out over the next couple of days. So there's going to be a level of exhaustion already coming into this event that maybe I could use as like a prelude to what St. Louis will be. St. Louis is 1 round a day. It's very nice and comfortable.
And
but it'll still be really long games.
Right.
Yeah. Kostya, Jesse's brought up so many interesting things, but do you have any comments on his pie chart before we put it away? Like, do you feel like he's doing a good job of following the program, or do you see any?
No, I would just echo what you guys said. I think just like adding a bunch of sparring throughout the year would be super useful. But no, like the breakdown looked awesome. I mean, I think the idea of the breakdown was always not that you should be doing that percentage on a weekly basis, but just like over time, over like a year's worth of effort, it should look pretty balanced and not dominated by the openings.
Yeah. Okay. So we're in agreement. Jesse's pie chart looks pretty pristine. Now, Kostya, you had thing. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say one thing just to counterbalance that. It was hilarious is that, when we asked Shankland ages ago, and Shankland's opinion was Kraai should really study the sidelines of all these variations in the opening to hammer these old-time GMs. And that's obviously a completely different take. So like I could spend ages, studying maybe the specific openings of these older dudes and trying to catch them out in the weird openings they play. Because what are these older guys doing? They're for the most part trying to avoid theory.
Right.
They're trying to they just want a comfortable position. They don't want to try to memorize anything. They can't. Can't do it both. It's over.
Except Shaba. Shaba's always like cooking up tricky lines.
Yeah.
But he might be doing that too. I feel like every tournament he's just like playing new systems, and he must love it. But yeah, it's not a bad point, especially if someone has just been playing the same thing for many years, and you feel like you can catch them somewhere. Though I feel like what often happens is like somehow they trick you and then they get their position anyway. So you really have to be very prudent. But I think that's where a lot of opening sparring comes in. If you can, I don't know, like you can play through a lot of the accidents you might have over the board, which should be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the calculation is a big one. You just if you just showed up like a beast, like Magnus, it's like great physical shape, great calculation, and you're just willing to play for like 6 hours.
Yeah.
We know Magnus could win the senior championship of any country. That's not like a fair like hypothetical. Like, oh yeah, just show up, in sort of like Magnus's shape.
But rather like we know that these older dudes will crack. Everyone will crack.
Sure.
The system 2 bucket is just not as full with these older people. And I will say, I noticed in the last tournament, dude, there was moments, especially towards the later rounds, where I was done. It was very hard, and it's a very interesting moment, actually, when you're at the board and you know that your system 2 is depleted because your mind is telling you just to go with this move.
Yeah.
You know that you have to check yourself, but it's just like, one of the great things about the Kahneman book was he proved experimentally that you're done. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And at that point, like maybe you can go take a walk and eat a banana and try to come back, boss. But at that moment, there's no amount of like telling yourself to sit down and think about it that's going to help. You're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, I remember
so-
that. I remember that from my own experience for sure. Like even when I was at the youngest, most stamina, playing all the time, really honed in, like you'd hit some point in round 8 or 9 of some tournament where you're 7 hours into an end game and you're like, I just want to know if I'm winning or drawing this end game. Like, let me just play play the move that, roll the dice as opposed to calculate.
Yeah, you just feel cooked. You just physically can't anymore. Like when someone is explaining to you like the rules of like some complicated board game, you're like trying to follow, and you just can't. You just can't.
Let's just play the game.
No, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, I think there's a really important decision for Jesse to take as early as possible that will have some impact on what his entire plan should be for the year. And that is whether he wants to show up to the tournament playing one repertoire of openings that's his, that's his set, his repertoire, and he's just going to follow it. Or whether he wants to adopt an approach of, just hit and run. Like he's going to, figure that this guy doesn't like long games and this guy doesn't like getting attacked and this guy that, and just like be ready to switch it up day by day. It really changes how he should, prepare his openings and plan for the whole year. I think that's like the really, really big decision.
Okay, let me tell you how I think about it right now. So first of all, I think my black openings are pretty good. They're pretty dialed in right now. Just not from memorizing, but just through years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So like French and then Queen's Indian news. And I want to dial those in more. And one cool thing is I haven't played a lot of games recently that are online. So they won't be able to find me. And I have kind of some new ideas in some positions, but I want to, make that a little deeper. With white, I think I have a cool option now of playing, because I did the aggressive opening repertoire for white. I have that dialed in, and I have the London kind of dialed in. So there I have an option to go either way. And I think it's really cool if they're playing black against me to not know which one I'm going to do. And then I can kind of pick, see which one I want to go with.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's my intuition about where it would be.
So it seems like your
in
intuition
general-
is mostly to follow a set of openings that you want to play. You'll have a switch hitting with white, but you'll be really dialed into your openings versus like you go into the game or you go person by person and just pick different openings based on them.
And in general, I think like the style of the aggressive repertoire is what I'm going to want for the senior.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, then we can extrapolate some things about your training plan for the year, right? Should be to play those openings very consistently. You don't have any use for practicing random one-offs in your tournament games that you get, right? And to do a bunch of deep sparring.
So, having to play some dude playing the London against you for 6 hours, that's also not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the aggressive repertoire is kind of looking for a quick knockout and not like the long game exactly.
But you get these tactical situations soon where both players have to tank and use up a lot of energy. And if you just understand the positions a little bit, Anyways, I think both are very viable.
Yeah. And it gives you that option.
Tricky ones.
Having those two that are in a sense so different gives you the option, depending on the player, if you want to sort of drive them into difficult stuff early on or just draw things out. It's very, very opposite ways you can try and get your opponent. Let me just
say something that's anti-intuitive. London is a mirror image of the aggressive repertoire.
Yeah.
Very surprising, and it feels different because one is looking at the queen side, one is looking at but it is fundamentally the same. And one of the things I like about both of them is they allow white to develop according to simple principles. Okay? So you can play by principles and you don't have to be thinking too hectic about crazy stuff. Like I don't like opening systems that neglect development. I would never play the same issue against the queens. against the Nimzo Indian, for example. No, might be fine, but that's not me, boss. I'm going to develop my pieces, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So then let's talk a little bit about like maybe Jesse's weakness and how to work on that a little bit, because Kostya brought it up earlier, and I have noticed it as well. I think that and I think this is something that happens sort of like with age, so it's probably generally true of a lot of the opponents you'll face as well, Jesse, is that like it's easier to just play a bunch of moves that look nice than to go for something really critical that nobody can be really certain of the outcome. And I think that you'll find a higher percentage of young people who are willing to sort of go for those things. And as one gets older, you rely more on like, well, if I play, 50 moves that look good, eventually my advantage will grow a bit. But I think it probably leads to more draws and missed opportunities. So,
in longer games, Frank, right?
Yeah, longer games. Yeah.
With one of the things I've really noticed with open tournaments is that because I generally let's call it a prophylactic player. I get these games that I'm not knocking the opponent out. It's just going forever. And then, of course, mistakes are made on both sides, and the game might switch in evaluation or something like that. But, so in fact, I think one of the key problems of my rating decreasing recently is that I've had too many games that went forever, and then I was just crushed in the 2 rounds a day tournament, which honestly might be good experience, just that energetic experience for playing a nice 1 round a day thing like the UFC. But it's certainly true, and I'm aware of it. I've been going through my own games. I think the biggest thing is to go through your own games and something like that there are definitely moments where what I would describe it as is trying to think the critical moment in an intuitive way instead of a concrete way.
Yeah.
Right? Where you're like, the concrete solution is like you really have to look at everything and go as deep as possible. And even then, you're not going to be entirely sure.
Right. Yeah, it's a mix of you have to think concretely and you have to accept a little bit of uncertainty, right? Like there's going to be some detail that's not certain in advance. There's a possibility of overlooking something. You have to be accepting that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would think from a style point of view, it makes sense for you to play like lots of E4 in the coming year and like pull a Kramnik, where you just start playing like really like dynamic, aggressive chess. I don't know if that's the best approach to play in like the US Senior, but I feel like it could be just very useful to kind of experiment with that style of play, and then you get a ton more experience in like E4 positions, and then having to play with like a lot of risk and. Then I don't know. I feel like I'd be adding like a really interesting side tier game. It does bother me when you're playing like some 2100, and then you'd probably just crush them even if you play like King's Gambit, and just get some tactical mess where they would just mess up because they don't remember the theory, and then you would just crush them. But now it's like the slow bird.
Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, it's tough, but it's cool that you have like a full year too. Really, like whatever your results are for the next year don't really matter because it's all about like kind of this one tournament and then the next
definitely matters. So.
Next USC.
I mean, let's just say the obvious. The bummer about this year was I didn't qualify by rating. So the
ultimate rating is very tough.
The ultimate dream is I get back to where I was, and then I just qualify automatically, bounce.
But the low rating, it's almost like is like Melik was complaining about this as well. It's like he's been playing a lot of these open events, and I see him, and he's like. Playing kids and they're very underrated. And so it's like the fact that he's playing, it's like his rating also like I'm sure decreased in the last couple of years, even though he maybe is in some of the best form of his life, which is just kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's true. Like with all the rating deflation, to a certain extent, you could look at an active rating and say that's worth 100 points more than an old rating from 5 years ago that hasn't been battered by the kids.
Yeah, no, just keeping the rating, I think, is achievement these days.
Yeah, but so anyway, I think that would be like one of the best projects for Jesse to work on is sort of being more trigger happy, right? A little bit more willing to pull that trigger and roll some dice and go for it. And so, if you can think somehow within your training or your opening choices, or your sparring, to just like push yourself in that direction a little bit more, I think that would be sort of every training program we have. Okay, it may generally be good for people at that rating level, but there's always some ability to personalize it, right? Like it would go well with having a private coach. You have private lessons, right? So there's always some room to personalize what are you really trying to do with every game you spar, or every, analysis that you do of a game of yours, every post-mortem, right? So we have a list of tasks, but you have some choice in how you make use of the time within each of those tasks and what you try and get out of each task. And so I think that's kind of the personalization piece for you that's most important.
Do you play any training games against like KGB or someone like that?
I play training games with you people and the sparring. One thing that was really interesting, I want to bring this up with the training program. So I watched this. There's an amazing documentary about Schwarzenegger that just came out. And, the dude, right, obviously there was the bodybuilding phase. He crushed that. Then there was the movie phase, obviously crushed. Then there was the politician phase, dude crushed it. And one of the things he was talking about is like at all those phases, he had a cohort of people, and he had like mentors, and he had people who was helping. So that's like our plus minus equal. And I think, really critical is when we, me, but also us, do this project over the next year, like it has to be more systematic with the sparring. And it's hard because, you guys have different schedules and I have a schedule, yada, yada. So like getting the sparring done, it's a thing that's hard to arrange. It would be better, of course, if we had more people, and trying to get Dean and Polito into our program. We need more people too. It's just the same thing. The lower cohort sometimes complain that there are not enough people in the cohort. Well, we do. We need more
We've
people.
got way less.
Anyway, there has to be that rich competitive feeling, right? Of like, okay, we're going to bang it out here and it's going to be difficult. We're going to like compete against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on board. I'm going to go all in on the chess training too. In fact, I thought it'd be fun if we did like a rating bet or something,
Okay.
By like the end of 1 year, something like that.
A rating what?
A rating bet, like just to see who has the higher rating.
Okay, let's do the bet, dog. Yeah,
because we're pretty similar. I feel like
of like your FIDE ratings.
We have to come up with like what the prize or the punishment might be, but otherwise, I'm into the bet. That's cool.
Yeah. That would be really fun.
Nice.
Well, let's establish it, dude.
Yeah.
We can decide on the punishment later, or maybe you have an idea.
Yeah, let's think about it. I have no idea. I just thought.
But how about it'll be August, the rating, our respective ratings at August 1st, 2024.
August, yeah? Or do you want to do like average rating or just August 1st?
August 1st, boss.
Then once you get ahead, you could just stop playing in tournaments they do in
sure.
FIDE for the candidates.
Now, first of all, Kostya can't stop because that dude's got to try to get the GM titles.
Right.
He's got to put the tournaments. And that'll be August 1st will also be probably, I don't know when the U.S. senior is going to be next year, but it'll be before then.
Likely same time, like July.
Yeah, so it'll be right around that time. So that will also reflect my performance there. So it's not like I can stop.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a go. All right, August 1st.
Okay. Another thing we could do. Another thing we can. Another thing we can do that I think would really like speak well to Jesse, like his juices get flowing for more competitive stuff, right? Everybody's different. That really motivates him to put in the work. But another thing we could do is kind of like, what's that?
I said people the same. They need competitive. You need some competition, boss.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's a little bit different. I'm happy to just spar a position 8 times, but you always want it to be like a match, right? So we have some differences, but I think, we could do a thing where we track our results. We could make like a little league of like sparring, and have it like a huge cross table or tally of some way to, see who is coming out on top in the
I think it would just be cool.
algorithms and stuff.
on the page somewhere on the like a Kostya versus Kraai FIDE graph.
Ooh, the live.
And then there would be like an endpoint of August 1st, and it would just show. It would just show it. Done.
Oh, maybe like a sports book, like a market.
Yeah, dude, you be betting on that stuff, man. Get it going. Yeah, dude. If I win, I get to pee on Kostya's leg.
Okay. Speechless. I'm like wondering if you can post that on YouTube. That's exactly the kind of thing people click on. Like, whew. I know a lot of people would do that just for views. Anyway, I think one other point, Jesse, I don't see it in your non-dojo activities in your pie chart, so I don't know if you're doing it or not, but playing blitz chess and stuff like that, I think that's bad for you. Because because I think that would like lead to sort of, general superficial moves and not, really looking for the specific win. But have you just stopped playing blitz?
For the most part, yeah.
Nice. All right. I would stick with that.
I don't, I'm not going to be, if I play some blitz, it's not going to be a big thing. I played like, someone wants to play like, sometimes Chess Kid has me play an exhibition match or something that's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
Oh, it's cool. You got the 2,700 goal, and then you basically just quit after that, which I think is
it's nice.
It's fun. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll set up the bet because that sounds super fun. I like the sparring leaderboard as well.
Yeah.
Keep track. That also sounds cool. Yeah, I think just more competition.
Yeah.
It's good.
Is the other thing, Kostya, is it public knowledge, the thing that we've been discussing on Discord?
The sparring bot, the new
with the associated leaderboards.
Yeah, well, that's coming. Yeah, that's definitely public. We've been talking about that, kind of planning it out. But yeah, that's super exciting. I'll just plug that right now.
Yeah.
But that's going to be something we're adding, not just to the Discords, but actually to the site as well. So anyone that joins our Lichess team, the tournaments are going to be on Lichess. Anyone that joins the official Dojo Lichess team will be able to sign up for different arenas and Swiss tournaments that we're going to run, like Blitz events, Rapid, we're going to do Classical as well. So anyone that plays those events will then get tracked, and we're going to have our own like Dojo leaderboard. So we're going to start running a bunch of tournaments, and we're going to have this like very public leaderboard, kind of like a Grand Prix system. Like you score points in the arenas, you score points in the Swiss, then you get ranked against everyone else. And yeah, I'm super pumped for that because I think people love leaderboards. It's just very clear. It's just basic animal psychology.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a really nice motivation for lots of people to spar, and we can do a similar like tiny private one where we keep track of like our results in the small group of, high rated players who don't have as many people to spar with, and hopefully it can motivate Jesse to get more sparring done too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would be motivated by that for sure. I think that would be super fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's going to do it.
That's the plan.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.